everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Criterion, and we'll be looking at the forthcoming releases for March, including a behind-the-scenes look at the films themselves and a breakdown of the supplemental features contained on the discs. But first, a word about some issues that have arisen with last month's release of Miller's Crossing. Now, that appears to be a few minutes shorter than the currently available Blu-ray releases. Reports indicate that the edit on the Criterion version is 1.5 minutes shorter than previous releases, and Criterion state that the Coens trimmed this release version much as they did with Blood Simple. Now, there's an indication, of course, that directors, when asked to supervise new restorations, see that as a new opportunity to improve upon and refine the original. The purists among us, of course, have a very vocal opinion on this. We'll see how this plays out. And a more recent example, of course, is Wong Kar-wai and the discussion around his colour timing changes on the films in his box set, The World of Wong Kar-wai, released last year. So on we go with March releases, and we begin by looking towards Europe, and specifically to Hungary, with Marta Mazaros and her film Adoption. Now, this has already received a release in the UK via the Second Run label, and so is already available here, but Criterion have now announced the US release of this title coming into their collection. Trailblazing auteur Marta Mazaros gives aching expression to the experiences of women in 1970s Hungary in this sensitive and absorbing drama. It became the first film directed by a woman to win the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival. Through intimate camera work, Adoption immerses the viewer in the worlds of two women, each searching for fulfillment. Kata, played by Katalin Berek, a middle-aged factory worker who wants to have a child with her married lover, and Anna, young Vera V, that's a teenage ward of the state, determined to emancipate herself in order to marry her boyfriend. The bond that forms between the two women speaks quietly but powerfully to the social and political forces that shape women's lives, as each navigates the realities of love, marriage and motherhood in their quest for self-determination. Mazaros began her career working in documentary film, having made 25 documentary shorts over the span of 10 years. Her full-length directorial debut, of course, was Elsa Vosot Nap, which is The Girl from 1968, and that was the first Hungarian film to have been directed by a woman. Mazaros' films are in many ways reflective of her own experiences growing up, and they deal with issues relevant to her life. Having lost both of her parents early in her life, she spent much of her youth living in a post-Stalinist Hungary. Mazaros' life was rife with tragedy and depression, and her films are often reflective of this. Additionally, because Mazaros spent many of her first years as a filmmaker working in documentary films, many of her feature films, of course, contain much documentary footage. And in most of Mazaros' features, the films are open-ended, lack a conventional plot, and the dialogue is sparse. In terms of content, Mazaros' films explore the wide and often tragic gaps between ideals and realities, and between parents and their children. Mazaros' films also deal with realities usually ignored in Eastern European cinema. That's the subordination of women, conflicts of urban and rural cultures, antagonism between the bureaucracy and its employees, alcoholism, the generation gap, the dissolution of traditional family structures, and the plight of state-reared children. Adoption looks mainly at things from a woman's viewpoint, and this release comes with a liberal sprinkling of features. They are a new video essay by scholar Katrin Porcigs, interview with Mazaros from 2019, Blowball, a 1964 short film, Marta Mazaros, the portrait of the Hungarian filmmaker, a 1979 documentary from Katja Raganelli, a trailer, and a written essay by the film scholar Elena Gorfinkel. Adoption is a powerful and emotional film from one of Hungary's major filmmakers. It releases in the US on Criterion from Tuesday 8th of March, and it's Spine 1115. Now moving across to the UK, here we have the first Charlie Chaplin film to arrive in the collection. Now the US has been luckier than we have. They've got The Kid, The Great Dictator, Limelight, Monsieur Verdot and The Circus all in the collection already. And we'll be getting Modern Times from Monday the 14th of March here in the UK. Now, of course, Charlie Chaplin is, of course, hailed as one of the greatest ever silent movie comedians, and Modern Times certainly is an example of his talent. This film saw his last outing as the iconic tramp character, as he went to work as a giddily inept factory employee who becomes smitten with gorgeous gamine Paulette Goddard. With his barrage of unforgettable gags and sly commentary on class struggle during the Great Depression, Modern Times, be it almost a decade into the talkie era and containing moments of sound and even song, is a timeless showcase of Chaplin's untouchable genius as a director of silent comedy. During a European tour promoting City Lights, Chaplin got inspiration for Modern Times from both the lamentable conditions of the continent during the Great Depression, along with the conversation with Mahatma Gandhi, of all people, in which they discussed modern technology. Chaplin didn't understand why Gandhi generally opposed it, though he granted that machinery with only consideration of profit had put people out of work and ruined many people's lives. Chaplin began preparing the film in 1934 as his first talkie, and he went as far as writing a dialogue script for it and experimenting with some sound scenes as well. However, he soon abandoned these attempts and reverted back to his silent format, with synchronized sound effects and sparse dialogue. The dialogue experiments confirmed his long-standing conviction that the universal appeal of his little tramp character would be completely lost if he ever spoke on screen. Now, most of the film was shot at silent speed. That's 18 frames per second, and it was projected at sound speed, 24 frames per second, and that made the slapstick action taking place appear even more frenetic. Now, the filming process was longer than normal, and that was because of the technical complexities involved. It's shot from October 1934 through to August 1935, and the reception from audiences was good. The film wasn't without controversy, though. It featured the central character taking cocaine in the movie, and the production code, of course, established in 1930, forbade the depiction of illegal drug use in films at that time. But this, of course, wasn't the first time Chaplin had challenged those codes. Music also played a big part in the film, and the score was collaborated on with Alfred Newman, with specifically the love theme. Now, that later gained the lyrics to become Smile, certainly one of his most enduring love themes ever, and it was, of course, set to record with lyrics later by Nat King Cole. Modern Times is certainly one of Chaplin's more technically ambitious films, and remains the first film he made where his voice was clearly heard. Now, the features on this disc are quite impressive, and we begin with an audio commentary from 2010 by Charlie Chaplin biographer David Robinson. There are two visual essays, one by Chaplin historian John Betzkin and Jeffrey Vance, the other. Programme from 2010, featuring the film's visual and sound effects with experts Craig Barron and Ben Burt. An interview from 1992 with Modern Times music arranger David Ragson, plus a selection from the film's original orchestral track. Certainly worth hearing there. Two segments cut from the film. All at Sea from 1933, a home movie by Alistair Cook featuring Chaplin and the actress Paulette Goddard, with a score by Donald Suzin and an interview with Cook's daughter Susan Cook Kittredge. The Rink from 1916, a Chaplin two-reeler. And for the first time from 1967, that's a short Cuban documentary about first-time moviegoers seeing the film Modern Times. Chaplin Today, Modern Times 2003, that's a programme with filmmakers Jean-Pierre and Luc Dardenne, and 3 theatrical trailers and a written essay by film critic Saul Austerlitz, and on the Blu-ray edition we've a piece by the film scholar Lisa Stein, including excerpts from Chaplin's writing about his 1930s world tour. Plenty to view there in the supplements. Modern Times releases here in the UK a Spine 543, and it comes out on Monday the 14th of March. Now, coming to the UK on the same day is Kawaita Hana, or Pale Flower in translation, directed by Masahiro Shinoda. Now, the film is about Muraki, played by Ryo Ekibe, a Yakuza hitman just released from prison. At an illegal gambling parlour, he finds himself drawn to a mysterious young woman named Seiko, played by Mariko Kaga. Though Seiko loses large sums of money, she asks Moraki to find games with larger and larger stakes, and the two become involved in an intense and mutually destructive relationship. Now, Shinoda directed 33 films between 1960 and 2003, and this was his 9th film. Now, to be exact, the translation isn't pale flower, but withered flower. His focus on youth and the cultural and political turmoil of 1960s Japan certainly made him a central figure in the Shokushu new wave alongside Nagisa Oshima and Yoshisuke Yoshida. He worked in a variety of genres, from the Yakuza film Pale Flower to the samurai film Assassination, but he particularly became known for his focus on socially marginal characters and for an interest in traditional Japanese theatre. Now, the features on this disc are a new video interview with the director Masahiro Shinoda, selected scene audio commentary by the film scholar Peter Greeley, co-producer of music for the movies, Toru Takemitsu, original theatrical trailer, new and improved English subtitle translation on the film, and a written essay by the film critic Chuck Stevens, and the cover art is by Michael Boland. Pale Flower is a welcome addition to the UK collection, introducing viewers to the work of Shinoda. The title releases as Spine 564, and it's out also on Monday the 14th of March. Next we have the re-release on Blu-ray of the classic Jean-Pierre Melville film Le Cercle Rouge. Now, this is a recent 4K restoration by Europe's Studio Canal, and it's an example of the successful collaboration now taking place between Criterion and them in making these restorations available on physical media. The UK received the 4K version of this in 2020 as part of their Vintage World Cinema series, and they're due to do it again with Criterion, and they're going to use a Studio Canal restoration of Mr. Klein, that's Joseph Losey's film, and that's been announced for May. So a word about this, and I'm sorry to say it's not all good. The film's supposed to have prominent blue primaries and nuances that ensure a consistent cold appearance to the visuals. However, the new restoration by Studio Canal has introduced notably warmer yellow primaries and hues that alter the entire colour of the visuals. Now, many of the colour shifts are so pronounced, in fact, that in certain areas, and particularly where previously there were different ranges of whites, there are now even new varieties of highlights. Now, this is very unfortunate because delineation, clarity, depth, and especially density, they're vastly superior in this release. So on a larger screen, the difference between the new presentation and the old presentation of this film can be quite dramatic. And there are no traces of age-related imperfections either. Now, Criterion released this 4K UHD as a Dolby Vision HDR graded Studio Canal restoration on a dual format combo pack, and it's the same artwork used, of course, as the original DVD version, and that already sits as Spine 218 in the US collection. Now, this is considered by many to be one of Melville's best films, and of course subjective. Many also echo that it's Alain Delon's best performance yet, and I would have begged to differ on that, I'm afraid. In Le Cercle Rouge, Alain Delon plays a master thief fresh out of prison who crosses paths with a notorious escapee and an alcoholic ex-cop played by Yves Montand. Now, the unlikely trio plot a heist against impossible odds until a relentless inspector and their own pasts seal their fates. With its honourable anti-heroes, coolly atmospheric cinematography and breathtaking set pieces, Le Cercle Rouge is the quintessential film by Jean-Pierre Melville. He's the master of ambiguous, introspective crime cinema. The film, of course, is famous for its climactic heist sequence, which is about half an hour in length and has almost no dialogue. Now, critical reviews for this film were rather mixed. Vincent Canby, in a 1993 review of the 99-minute version, dubbed into English, said that the film may baffle anyone coming upon Melville for the first time. Peter Bradshaw, in a 2003 review of the 102-minute reissue of the film, called the film a treat and noted Melville blends the Chandleresque world of his own devising with gritty French reality. With its taut silent robbery sequence, his movie gestures backwards to Rififi, And with Monton's specially modified bullets, it anticipated Frederick Forsyth's Day of the Jackal and the contemporary techno thriller. Good review. Whatever the critics thought, it was relatively successful at the French box office the year it was released. That's 1970, and it was the 5th highest grossing film of that year. Now, the Criterion release of this comes with the same features as, of course, it had on the DVD version. One 4K UHD disc of the film presented in Dolby Vision HDR, and one Blu-ray with the film and the features. There's segments from a 1971 episode of Cinéaste de notre temps featuring the director Jean-Pierre Melville. Interviews with assistant director Bernard Stora and Rui Nogueira, author of Melville on Melville. On-set and archival footage featuring interviews with Melville and Alain Delon, Yves Montand and André Bourvil. A trailer and essays by the film critics Michael Schrago and Chris Fujiwara. Excerpts from Melville on Melville, a 2000 interview with composer Eric Demarson, and an appreciation by the filmmaker John Woo. Le Cercle Rouge, with the colour tone changes I mentioned earlier, does not look like the film Melville originally directed. So I won't be purchasing this release, unfortunately, mainly because I already have the restoration from Studio Canal that was released in the UK. Le Cercle Rouge releases as a 4K UHD and Blu-ray combo on Tuesday the 15th of March and Spine 218, and I'll let you choose whether you want to take the plunge on that new version. And I mentioned to Boat People. Now, we covered this on last month's Let's Talk Criterion. A link to the episode, of course, is above. And it's a shattering look at the circumstances that drove hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese refugees to flee their homeland in the wake of the Vietnamese War, told through the images of haunting, unforgettable power. And that releases here in the UK, Monday, 21st of March. A downed airplane is a motley group of men's only protection from the relentless desert sun in a psychologically charged disaster epic, one of the all-time great survival movies. James Stewart is the veteran pilot whose Benghazi-bound plane, carrying passengers played by an unshaven ensemble of screen icons, including Richard Attenborough, Ernest Borgnine, Ian Bannon, Dan Duryea, Peter Finch and George Kennedy, crash lands in the remote Sahara Desert. As tensions simmer among the survivors, they find themselves forced to trust a coldly logical engineer, played by Hardy Kruger, whose plan to get them out may just be crazy enough to work, or it could kill them all. Flight of the Phoenix is directed by Robert Aldrich. Kiss Me Deadly is an earlier film of his and very popular in the collection, and it's Spine 568. Now, Flight of the Phoenix has been a long-awaited title to reach the Criterion Collection. It's based on the 1964 novel of the same name by English author Elliston Trevo. Principal photography started April 26, 1965 at 20th Century Fox Studios and 20th Century Fox Ranch, California. Other filming locations simulating the desert were Buttercup Valley, Arizona, and Pilot Knob Mesa in California, and the flying sequences were all filmed at the Pilot Knob Mesa near Winter Haven, located, of course, in California's Imperial Valley, along the western fringes of the Yuma in Arizona. Now, although the film was not a financial success, it was certainly well received by critics who praised Aldrich's direction and the performances of its cast. And it was also nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Supporting Actor for Ian Bannon and Best Editing for Michael Luciano. Hardy Kruger was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor, and Aldrich himself was nominated for Best Motion Picture Drama as Director. The filming was sadly marred by the death of one of the stuntmen. On the morning of July the 8th, Paul Mantz was flying the Tall Mantz Phoenix P1. That's the machine that was made of the wreckage, performing touch-and-go landings for the cameras, when the fuselage buckled during a touchdown. The movie model broke apart and cartwheeled, killing Mantz outright and seriously injuring the stuntman Bobby Rose. Paul Mantz was credited, of course, in the closing credits of the movie. We have an excellent cast, backing up James Stewart as Captain Frank Towns, Richard Attenborough as Lou Morin Hardy, Kruger as Heinrich Dorfman, Peter Finch as Captain Harris, Ernest Borgnine as Trucker Cobb, Ian Bannon as Ratbags Crow, Ronald Fraser as Sergeant Watson, Christian Marquand as Dr. Reno, Dan Doria as Standish, and of course George Kennedy as Mike Bellamy. The features on Flight of the Phoenix are a 2K digital restoration with a mono soundtrack, a new conversation between filmmaker Walter Hill and film scholar Alan Silver, new interview with biographer Donald Dewey on actor James Stewart and his service as a bomber pilot, a trailer for the film, and a written essay by filmmaker and critic Gina Talaroli. Oh, and of course there's new cover art by Sean Phillips, and that's really excellent cover art. Flight of the Phoenix is available in the US only, and it's Spine 1116 1116 from Tuesday 22nd of March, and certainly a worthy addition to your collection. Now, Criterion has its fair share of live and erratic performances in the collection already. We've had last year's Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review, the Rolling Stones' Gimme Shelter, the Monterey Pop Festival, and of course, now we have Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz, featuring the last concert performance of America's The Band. Invited to capture the farewell performance of the legendary group The Band at San Francisco's Winterland Ballroom on Thanksgiving of 1976, Martin Scorsese conceived a new kind of music documentary. Enlisting 7 camera operators led by the director of photography Michael Chapman, and also including renowned cinematographers Vilmos Zsigmond and Laszlo Kovacs, and production designer Boris Levin to design the strikingly theatrical sets, Scorsese created a grandly immersive experience that brings viewers on stage and inside the music itself. That music, as performed by the band and a host of other generation-defining artists, which included Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, the Staple Singers, Muddy Waters and Neil Young, lives on as an almost religious expression of the transcendent possibilities of rock and roll. Now, Criterion produced a 4K remaster of this, personally supervised by Scorsese, and a surround soundtrack approved by musician Robbie Robertson from the band. Now, for any rock fan anywhere, this release is a must-buy. Not only do they get a pristine master, but DTS Master Audio in 5.1 surround sound, ensuring a concert-like sound experience to match the visuals. The film starts as it means to go on, with a card, "This should be played loud." Good advice. The idea for a farewell concert came about early in 1976 after Richard Manuel was seriously injured in a boating accident. Robbie Robertson then began giving thought to leave the road, envisioning the band becoming a studio-only band, similar to the Beatles' decision to stop playing live shows in 1966. Now, he was also concerned about the negative effects of being on the road too long. Now, although the other band members didn't agree with Robertson's decision, the concert was set at Bill Graham's Winterland Ballroom, where the band had made its first debut as a group in 1969. Now, originally the band was to perform on its own, but then the notion of inviting Ronnie Hawkins and Bob Dylan was hatched, and the guest list grew to include other performers as well. Robertson wanted to invite people who'd been a strong influence on their music through the years, people who represented various music styles, including New Orleans rock and roll, English blues and Chicago blues. When he called Bill Graham, he said he wanted the concert to be a kind of celebration, the end of a chapter for the band. Now, Robertson initially wanted to record the concert on 16mm film, and he recruited director Martin Scorsese to direct it, based on his use of music in Mean Streets. Under Scorsese, the film grew into full-scale studio production with 7 35mm cameras. Now, the cameras were operated by several cinematographers, of course, including Michael Chapman, who did the cinematography of Raging Bull, Vilmos Sigmund, who did the cinematography for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Laszlo Kovacs, who did the cinematography for Easy Rider and Five Easy Pieces. These are really, really celebrated cinematographers. The stage and lighting was designed by Boris Levin, and he had been the production designer on musical films like West Side Story and The Sound of Music in the 60s. And Bill Graham's assistants came along, and the set was developed from San Francisco's Opera's production of La Traviata, and that was rented as a backdrop for the stage. Crystal chandeliers were also hung all over the stage. Now, the result, of course, was visually amazing, and it introduced viewers outside of a live gig to the experience of a live gig in a cinema. And of course, we can now enjoy this release in the comfort of our own homes. Some performances were omitted from the film, and that included Stephen Stills, who only performed in a jam session. Also omitted were performances by the poets Lenora Candle, Robert Duncan, freewheeling Jack Reynolds, Emmett Grogan, Diane DePrima and Sweet William. Both jam sessions were completely omitted from the film. Now, Criterion already have Scorsese-directed titles in the collection. The most recent edition, of course, is the one I mentioned earlier, the Bob Dylan Rolling Thunder Review from last January. Itself a very exciting title. Now, the 4K UHD Dolby Vision presentation has, of course, HDR Dolby Vision grading and, as mentioned, a 5.1 surround soundtrack. The features on the disc are quite extensive, and they are an alternate soundtrack, the original 1978 stereo mix, and an uncompressed stereo mix from 2001. 2 audio commentaries featuring Scorsese on one, and members of the band, members of the production crew, and performers Dr. John, Ronnie Hawkins and Mavis Staples. A new interview with Scorsese conducted by the critic David Fear. A documentary from 2002 about the making of the film itself. Outtake. An interview from 1978 with Scorsese and Robertson. A trailer and a television spot, and a written essay by critic Amanda Petrucci. Now, The Last Waltz is available on 4K, UHD, Blu-ray combo, a spine 1118, from Tuesday the 29th of March. And I've certainly got my pre-order in. I can't wait to sit back and enjoy the concert in the comfort of my own home. Finally, we turn to Love Jones. Steeped in the bohemian cool of Chicago's 1990s black creative scene, Love Jones is the smart, sexy and stylish debut feature of writer-director Theodore Witcher. It's a love story for anyone who has ever wondered, how do I know when I've found the other one? Lawrence Tate and Nia Long have magnetism and chemistry to burn as the striving, artistically talented 20-somethings. He's a poet, and she's a photographer. They spark over their love of literature and jazz, but whose mutual reluctance to commit to a relationship leaves them both navigating an emotional minefield of confusion, jealousy and regrets. Velvety cinematography, an unforgettable eclectic soundtrack, dazzling dialogue and refreshingly low-key naturalistic performances by an ensemble cast, including Isaiah Washington, Lisa Nicole Carson, Bill Bellamy, Bernadette Speaks and Leonard Roberts come together in an intoxicating, seductively moody romance that engages both the heart and the mind. Have I sold it for you? This is Theodore Witcher's only film to date. It didn't receive great box office success, unfortunately, on its 1997 release, although it was fairly well praised by critics. In Chicago, Darius Lovehall, played by Lawrence Tate, a poet who's giving a reading at the Sanctuary. That's an upscale nightclub presenting jazz and poetry to a bohemian clientele. Shortly before his set, he meets Nina Mosley, played by Nia Long, a gifted photographer, and they exchange small talk, and Darius makes his interest clear when he retitles his love poem A Blues for Nina. A mutual attraction is sparked between them. Music in Love Jones plays a large part with the soundtrack from various contemporary artists, including Refugee Camp featuring Lauryn Hill, Maxwell, Groove Theory, Trina Broussard, the Brand New Heavies, Kenny Lattimore and Lincoln Jazz Center Orchestra, and Brother to the Night, a blues for Nina, that's Darius's poem performed by Lawrence Tate. And the cast consists of Lawrence Tate as Darius Lovehall, Nia Long, Nina Mosley, Isaiah Washington plays Savon Garrison, Lisa Nicole Carson plays Josie Nichols, Bill Bellamy as Hollywood, Leonard Roberts as Eddie Coles, and Bernadette Speaks and Sheena Downs both playing Bernadette L. Clark. It was likely the fairly unknown cast made people lose interest in the audiences at the box office, but since its release it's gained a cult following for its realistic characters and unorthodox take on the romance genre. The extras contained on this release are a new audio commentary featuring Theodore Witcher, a new interview with Theodore Witcher and film scholar Rachel J. Gates, a new interview with music scholars Mark Anthony Neal and Shanna L. Redmond on the soundtrack itself, panel discussion featuring Witcher and members of the cast and crew, a small featurette, and a written essay by the critic Danielle Amir Jackson. Cover art for the release is by F. Ron Miller. Love Jones releases in the US and the UK as Spine 1117, and it's out in the US on Tuesday 29th of March and in the UK on Monday 25th of April. So that's it for the March forthcoming releases. In April, we look forward to Alex Cox's Walker getting its Blu-ray release, Vittorio De Sica bringing us Miracle in Milan, The Girl Can't Help It, Aya Moffat, and Bernard Tavernier in Round Midnight, and the 4K UHD debut of Men Landing on the Moon in For All Mankind. And in the UK, we have Leo McCarey's Make Way for Tomorrow and film adaptation of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. That's directed by Richard Brooks. So until then, it's goodbye, and above all, good viewing.